This is Peter Laws in Norman, Oklahoma. On the air since 1987, you're tuned to the International Radio Report, 30 minutes of radio about radio every Sunday morning on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and live streaming around the globe at ckut.ca.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. It is Sunday, June the 4th, 2023. My name is Sheldon. I am here with Gilles. We thank you for tuning in to our show. We are here every week on CKUT with 30 minutes of news and information, of things happening in the world of radio. We have an email address if you'd like to reach us, radioreport@yahoo.com. You can listen to our show over the radio, of course, or live streaming and archived at the CKUT website, ckut.ca. Our Facebook group has a few new members this week. We welcome Jeremy, Graham, and Jean-Francois, bringing us to 914 members. And our YouTube channel is available to you if you would like to listen to the show at your own convenience, and go back and listen to previous shows as well. We have many of our shows archived there. Just look for International Radio Report on YouTube. And there are 840 subscribers. You can subscribe and receive notices each time a new video of the show is posted up there. The stories that we cover on the show, we do take the time after to post links to those stories on the Facebook group. So if you want to get more information, sometimes we don't read the whole articles or there are related articles to the story. We can put those up on the Facebook group as well. The Facebook group is a really good place to go. Lots of additional information there. So we get started with an interesting story you found this week. A strange place for a pirate radio station.
Feds claim a pirate radio station is hiding in a space launch facility. This is by Terry Matthew, 5mag.net. Spaceport America calls itself the world's first purpose-built commercial spaceport. It was funded with an estimated $200 million investment from the New Mexico state government and provided the base for Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic. According to the feds, Spaceport America may also be hiding a pirate radio station. On May 24th, the Federal Communications Commission's enforcement arm sent a notice to Spaceport America alleging that their Denver office is investigating a complaint about an unlicensed FM broadcast station operating on frequencies 95.3 and 96.3 megahertz. An agent from the Denver office confirmed that unauthorized radio signals were transmitted on frequencies 95.3 and 96.3 from Spaceport America property located between Las Cruces and Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, between June 21st and June 25th, 2022, during the Spaceport America Cup 2022 event. The letter, typically the first notice of an open investigation and warning prior to enforcement, states that continued broadcasting from the site may result in a fine in excess of $2 million. Investigation of Spaceport America is even more egregious, though, as the spaceport is owned and operated by the state of New Mexico itself. By coincidence, Richard Branson, who gained his first notoriety in the music industry and later launched Virgin Radio, was on site at Spaceport America a day after the letter was sent, posting a selfie with the latest Virgin Galactic launch. Now, this is intriguing, especially from a facility that launches rockets of all sorts.
Yeah, they seem to tie it into an event that was going on there, though, in 2022. And it's not really clear whether this has been ongoing, though, after that. It's almost like maybe they just put it on the air for like a special event or something. Yeah. Different events have done this in the past. I know we have some here in Montreal where they get a permission to run a low-powered FM transmitter, like the Grand Prix, for example, where they run a station over the weekend on an empty FM frequency. I don't know if that's what was happening here, but if that's what it was, then they obviously didn't get permission to do it because somebody obviously complained about it, and they have been handed the notice. Now, whether they pulled the plug on it right away or not, I don't know. But I guess we'll wait and see if anything happens with it. It took them a little while to get after them, though. If it happened in 2022 in June, so almost a year before they get the notice. So, anyways, we'll see if we hear any more about that. Our next story is something we've heard about this happening before with country music radio stations. And now there's been a study put out about it. The headline is Study Calls Out Country Radio's Lack of Women. This was published by Radio Inc. A recent study titled They Won't Play a Lady-O on Country Radio, examining back-to-back plays by gender, race, and sexual orientation by Jan Diem and Dr. Jada Watson, presents data to back up the belief that country radio stations have been reluctant to play songs by women, especially back-to-back. The study analyzed programming on 29 major market country radio stations in large market areas throughout 2022. The authors said, for each of these stations, we downloaded 24-hour daily logs from Mediabase for 19 total dates in 2022. The last Friday of each month, plus 7 additional days that correspond to release dates for all the 2022 songs released by women that charted in the same year, giving stations the best commercial shot at playing music by women. Dr. Watson and Diem found that songs by women were played back-to-back only 0.5% of the time, with most of plays during overnight hours. The study also revealed that the majority of back-to-back plays for women were not current singles, but rather older songs from the Gold catalog or recurrent songs. Furthermore, the study showed songs by women of color and LGBTQ+ artists received even less airplay, with less than 1% for each category in 2022. Overall, despite the incorporation of data beyond radio airplay in the Hot Country Songs chart, the percentage of charting songs by female artists has averaged just 15% in recent years. The author says the lack of representation on country radio has detrimental effects on female artists' careers, leading to fewer signing opportunities, performance slots, award nominations, and limited growth and evolution. Now, as I said, I've heard this before. It's not the first time that this has been looked at, but they had done, I know we talked about previous surveys that were done, and it seemed that even women listeners didn't want to hear a lot of country songs by women. So I'm not quite sure what this is all about, why it's happening, why their music is not being played. And if it's not being played, then automatically that means they don't sell as much because people are not being exposed to the music. What's causing this?
You know what? I was reading that article and thinking about country music in general, and even on another side, rock music. And although there's a lot of great female rockers and there's great female artists in the country genre, for some reason, I don't know why, it's almost as if the style of music that country music is, or even rock, feels more like a man thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's weird. And is it because we've been exposed a lot more? I'd be curious if we do the same survey on rock stations.
Yeah, I know the target audience, if you look at our Montreal rock station, English station, Chaume FM, they're targeting a 25 to 49 male audience. They even state that that's what they're targeting. That's the demographic of the station. And that does lead to more male artists. I mean, on a percentage basis, though, there are more male rock artists than there are female, but there still should be more of a balance. But country is very heavily weighted to male artists. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a guy thing, like you said. Historically, like they did say, a lot of the female music that is being played is older music. Mm. There were a lot of really big superstars in country music a long time ago.
Yeah.
Today, there still are. I mean, some of them are kind of crossover artists, though. Like we're starting to see Shania Twain is getting played on sort of pop stations and not just country. There are others that sort of fall in between there. So I don't know. They're not country enough, maybe, for the listener. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
A lot of modern country music does sound way more pop rockish than it would sound country, actually.
That is happening with the male artists too, though. So yeah, I don't know if that's the answer. It might be partially the answer, but consultants go in and they recommend what should be played and what's on the charts and what artists you're going to push. So maybe that's got something to do with it as well. I don't know. Somehow at the end of the day, there's money connected to everything. So there's something going on there. I'm in that category, I'm sure.
So in our next story, we have AM radio hearings will be held on June 6th by Paul McLean from Radio World. That House of Representatives subcommittee hearing about AM radio that we told you about earlier will be held on the morning of Tuesday, June 6th. The Energy and Commerce Committee and its Communications and Technology Subcommittee have given the hearing the title, Listen Here, Why Americans Value AM Radio. The hearing will be open to the public and it will be streamed online at energycommerce.house.gov. The Republican chairs and senior Democratic members of this committee and subcommittee have all issued comments supportive of AM radio. Bills have been introduced in both houses of Congress to make AM radio mandatory. So that's going to be interesting. And I think it'd be interesting to watch the streaming event, see what all of these people have to say about AM radio.
Yeah, it's unique, as we said when we talked about this hearing last week or the week before. We didn't have the date at that time, but it was surprising that members of both parties are working together on this. It's something that doesn't happen very often, but they both seem to be siding on the same side on this particular issue. So June the 6th, it's in the morning, I guess, in Washington. So probably be, maybe like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. That I'm not sure of. They didn't specify the exact time. But again, the website, energycommerce.house.gov. So check that out on June the 6th, and it might be interesting to tune in and see how that all goes.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun is still active with a lot of pretty powerful sunspots. They're capable of doing some real big solar flares, especially sunspots AR3319 and AR3323. So these are going to be sunspots to look at in case of what's happening. Sunspot number is 143. The solar flux is 164. Like I said, propagation has been quite good, but it will have some disturbances from time to time due to solar flares that can happen. There is a coronal hole that actually could give us some effect today, June 4th, and maybe early this week. So that will, of course, have a little bit of disturbances on the HF band for our listening. But you know what? The best way to know what propagation is like is really to turn on a radio and listen.
This is Glenn Hauser. On the air since 1987, you're tuned to the International Radio Report, 30 minutes of radio about radio, every Sunday morning on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal, and live streaming around the globe at ckut.ca.
Our next story is from Paul McLean again at Radio World, and the headline, Ham Operator Faces Fine for Disruptions to the WARFA-net. A California man faces a possible $24,000 fine for allegedly playing recordings during an amateur radio net and not providing his call sign. Philip Baudet has been issued a notice of apparent liability by the FCC for apparently willfully and repeatedly interfering with the radio communications of the Western Amateur Radio Friendship Association, while it was attempting to hold a regularly scheduled net, and for failing to provide station identification on amateur radio frequencies. Baudette is a ham radio licensee N6PJB, that's November 6 Papa Juliet Bravo, in Bernie, California. And they go on to explain that a net is an on-air meeting of local amateur radio operators. I'm sure any of you that's tuned around has heard some of these different nets taking place. The FCC said it received numerous complaints about Baudette. It said that its agents went to Bernie 3 times in late 2022, and in each case heard Baudette playing recordings on a 3.908 megahertz that caused interference to the net while failing to provide his own call sign. It said he has 30 days to pay the proposed fine or to respond with reasons it should be reduced or canceled. We caution Baudette that future violations of this kind may result in significantly higher forfeitures or revocation of his amateur radio license. It's not the first time we've heard of this happening.
No, so many times. I remember, it seems quieter today, but I remember in the 90s also in the local nets on the VHF range where there was so many times somebody trying to interfere. And I'm amazed at what we can hear in the trash of HF sometimes. Like 7200 kilohertz is one of those frequencies where there's like almost constant 24-hour crap going on. And so unfortunately it happens, and sometimes it happens because somebody's mad at something. I remember hearing a net and people complaining because the net was on a frequency they wanted to use, and what resulted in pretty much a crappy experience all evening because somebody was always interfering, and I'm surprised they didn't take his license away from the first try.
Yeah, the fact that he's been approached 3 times in 1 year, and they have evidence that he can't deny. I mean, they have evidence of what he's doing. Number one, you're not supposed to play music on the ham bands, for one. So right there, it's a problem. On top of that, you're doing it on top of an organized communications network of amateur operators. Whether he doesn't like somebody there, whether he just doesn't want the net to happen, who knows? We don't know what makes these people tick, but he's not alone. Several people have been caught over the years and reported, and some have lost equipment, some have lost their licenses. It's a regulated activity. It is a privilege to have an amateur radio license. You're given frequencies to use, but there are rules and guidelines that have to be followed. What this guy's doing is definitely outside of those rules and regulations. So $24,000 fine. We'll see what happens next. See if the music is still playing or not.
Yeah.
For Mr. Baudette's sake, I hope it isn't.
So we have sad news. Unfortunately, Longwave is hardly hit by closures of station after stations. Denmark, it's news of a Longwave station closure. This is via the MW list, or Medium Wave List IO group, 2nd of June. Another good old Longwave transmitter bites the dust. It is with heavy heart I break the news that Kalundborg 243 will be closing down at the end of 2023, December the 31st. It has been in use since August 29th, 1927. So another one hit bites the dust. It's sad to see these longwave stations going away, particularly with longwave, which has such great propagation characteristics. These stations are heard hundreds of kilometers away from their country. And I know that I have a lot of European radio friends that are listening, active listeners of Longwave. They love to tune around that band. So it's really sad, and it's interesting, as I was saying to you, Sheldon, just as we before the recording. It's interesting that we never got long wave here in North America. It's typically, a European thing, and actually, so many radios you could see have long wave and medium wave on them.
Yeah, for people that aren't familiar with it, long wave. It's kind of the same as AM that we do have here in North America. Your regular AM radio stations from 540 up to 1700. These fall below those frequencies. They're down quite low, actually. 153 to
279, I think.
279, I think, is the highest.
Yep.
So they're down very low. Here in North America in particular, we get a lot of interference on those very low frequencies. Yeah. But this is just an example. This station that in Denmark that'll be closing started broadcasting in the early days of radio, 1927.
Yep.
And a lot of these long wave stations were put on in overseas, mostly in Europe. There were some in Africa, some in far parts of Russia. And they broadcast with very high power. And I think the goal behind them at the beginning was to have, there weren't many radio stations, but the ones that were there were very strong and had the ability to reach very great distances. And very costly to operate, though, very expensive in electricity, very elaborate antenna setups. So it seems that so many of them have disappeared over the last few years. There aren't that many of them left. Sometimes we get the advantage of interesting propagation in North America that we can hear some of these stations if you're in a quiet location, particularly over the winter months is when I've heard some of them from here in Montreal. Not easy to pick up. You do need quiet conditions and a nice darkness path between us and the broadcasters. But it's getting tougher and tougher to find them because there just aren't that many left, sadly.
If you look at the cost versus the coverage, it's interesting because you cover your first of all, you cover the whole country. So if your goal is to cover the population of your own country, well, it will cover the full country with only one transmitter. And in most cases, it actually covers all of Europe. So it's kind of interesting. It's sad to see that they go away.
Yeah, some of these stations so powerful. I know some of the North African ones. You're talking 1.2 megawatts. I think there's even a 2 megawatt station in Algeria or Morocco. I think one of those places. So yeah, it's kind of sad to see these stations going. Maybe they'll hold on to a few of them, but the trend seems to be eliminating them. If you want more information about what broadcasts or what you can hear on long wave, there is a club that specializes in long wave. It's called the Long Wave Club of America. You can look them up online. You can become a member. They have a little bulletin that they put out and send to all the members. It's really quite interesting. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in the long wave radio spectrum. So you may want to check them out. Again, it's called the Long Wave Club of America. And they do have a website as well that you can check them out and see all the kind of interesting and odd things that inhabit the long wave radio spectrum.
Yeah, here in North America, you'll hear mostly non-directional beacons, which send a tone, and then you'll have Morse code identification. So you can check that online and know where they are from. And there's all sorts of experimental amateur stuff that's in the low part also.
Yeah, you have a station that you decode every once in a while. It's just below the AM broadcast band, I think.
Yeah, I get several actually. There are a couple from the United States and a few from Canada. There are two frequencies, 518 kilohertz and 490 kilohertz. They send NAVTEX bulletins for marine weather, and what's interesting is 490 is always French language. 518 is English language, and I heard some from the east coast of the U.S. up to Alabama. Okay. Sometimes when propagation is good, I've heard some from up to Newfoundland, and leave the software open to the code NAVTEX, and I just leave it, and you'll hear the stations come in and then stop and from the different areas.
So these aren't voice transmissions, they're
No.
data transmissions that
Yep.
you need to decode. Okay, so there's something else you can check out on the bands. And again, so if you have a radio that tunes down below the AM broadcast band, then you'll be entering the world of long wave.
So we have upcoming ham radio contests.
It looks like a busy weekend coming up. There are a few contests going on, including one major VHF contest, which we'll get to in a second. First off, though, the VK Shires contest, 0100 to 2359 Zulu on June the 10th. That is organized by the Wireless Institute of Australia, 160 through 10 meters. And please note there is a 75-meter band DX window that is permitted for Australian stations only. This contest will be both single sideband and CW Morse code modes.
There's the Asia Pacific Sprint SSB, 1100 Zulu to 1300 Zulu, June 10th, so it lasts only 2 hours. Organized by the Asia Pacific Sprint Committee, the objective for stations outside of the Asia Pacific region to work as many Asia Pacific stations as possible within the 2-hour time limit, and for stations inside the Asia Pacific region to work as many stations as possible anywhere in the world within the 2-hour time limit. The bands 15 and 20 meters, and it's SSB.
There is the Portugal Day contest organized by the Rede dos Emissores Português. That is from 1200 Zulu June 10th to 1200 Zulu June 11th. The bands are 10 through 80 meters, and it's SSB, CW, or mixed combination of the two.
There's the GACW Worldwide South America CWDX contest, 1500 Zulu June 10th to 1500 Zulu June 11th, organized by the Argentina CW group. The bands 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meter bands, CW only.
And finally, the big VHF contest coming up, organized by the American Radio Relay League. It is the ARRL June VHF contest, 1800 Zulu June 10th to 0259 Zulu June 12th. The contest objective for amateurs in the US and Canada and their possessions to work as many amateur stations in as many different 2 degree by 1 degree Maidenhead grid squares as possible, using authorized frequencies above 50 megahertz. Stations outside the US and Canada and their possessions may only work in the US and its possessions and Canada. So it is all modes within the VHF spectrum. So you can do 6 meters, 2 meters. If you're in an area where you can do 220, you can get into anything above and use any of the modes available. So it'll be a busy weekend. Lots of stations operating in that contest. It would be nice if there was some kind of skip opening happen during that weekend. That would really make things interesting.
I think 50 megahertz is something to look at for this contest. I actually made my first, about 10 or 12 contacts on 6 meters, 50 megahertz this week from stations in South Carolina, in Georgia, Florida, Texas. And so the bands are opening up, and this could be a very, very interesting contest to monitor, especially on 50 megahertz.
Yeah. And we're getting into the hot summer months, so that triggers the FM DXers as well.
Yep.
Frequencies where you might start getting E-skip propagation. So some things to watch for. There has been a little bit of it reported already in May and now the beginning of June. So keep an ear out there as well. So lots of stuff for you to play with on your radios. Have fun with it. That's going to do it for us this week. We hope you'll tune in again next week for our next edition of our program. It is the International Radio Report every Sunday on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Il eut de lytter til Radio Danmark. You're listening to Radio Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark.